Greetings, visionaries. This is your host, the INFJ Visionary. And we've got several awesome topics to talk about today, all based on my sort of cursory scan. Today I searched by most view count, and oh man. Anyway, it's a kettle of fish. But here's one: how to be sure you're an INFJ. Well, I'm not going to be the world's greatest expert on telling someone how to be sure they're an INFJ. I know I'm an INFJ. If you're not an INFJ and you're not sure, you don't really know. I got some ideas, but the one thing I wanted to point out is that I'm not going to start any. Obviously, my channel is tiny. This person's channel is huge, but they're not an INFJ. They think they're an INFJ, but every time they open their mouth, I don't know what type they are, but it ain't INFJ. So his advice on how to be sure you're an INFJ would probably not be very good advice, and maybe mine wouldn't be either. I guess the number one way to know if you're an INFJ is by really thinking about and analyzing what intuition is, what it means to you, and what your true preferences are for navigating reality. And when you combine that with the now, I know a few INTJs. I don't know them well enough to query them about their interpersonal relations that they've had. It's always been pretty cursory with the INTJs I've known, but if they're a T, they're more a thinker than a feeler. And if you are the type of feeler that an INFJ is, then you know because it presses on you. It presses on you. It can be a blessing and a curse. It's definitely at odds with your essential introverted nature. So this is the inherent split, the inherent dichotomy of being an INFJ. So now, but you could be split in a lot of different ways. This is the thing. It's not. And I've seen a few videos lately, like you are not your type and things like that. And of course, you are a 100% unique person. The framework that I think is helpful for the Jungian archetypes is just to use them to see what your preferences are for how you parse reality. It's very simple. It's the cognitive stack. That's everything. If you're an INFJ, your number one preference is going to be using introverted intuition. And how is that different from extroverted intuition? It tends to be more focused. It tends to be a little more like obsessive, and more depth. But there are a lot of similarities. I'd say intuition at its by its nature tends to be curious. It tends to be sort of a function that brings in a lot of disparate elements. Now, you would think the extroverted intuition might even be better, and it probably is, since it tends to be broader and shallower. But hopefully I've answered your question, how to be sure you're an INFJ. Well, the number one way would be maybe go to one of these registered testers. But honestly, take the test. I told you about the Similar Minds. I think it's similarminds.com Jungian test, and it just first answer that comes in your head. Don't overthink anything. Don't think, what does this mean? What do they mean by that? I'm not sure. First thing that pops in your head, and run with it. Yeah. By the way, I don't know why people would even want to be an INFJ. Maybe they think it's cool to be the rarest type, but it takes a long time to get used to being an INFJ. It's not a very comfortable way to exist, although certainly I would prefer to be an INFJ over anything else, since that's all I've ever been. Which leads us to, friends, right? Now, you may have friends. I have a few friends that are INFJs. I actually know them better than any of the INTJs I've run into. Unfortunately, no male friends. They've all been females. But now there's friends and then there's friends, right? And I think when you're younger, you have a lot more friends. It's easy when you're very young to make friends. If you've ever seen kids, you take any young kid over to another young kid's house. They're playing. Like, hey, what's your name? Hey, what kind of toys you got? Let's play. Right? And now as we get older, of course, we get further and further removed from the spirit of that, which is a shame. It really is. But that kind of friend is not necessarily, that's a play date, right? That may not be your lifelong friend. Um, a friend of substance is something to be treasured. Um, I've had some very good close friendships in my life. I'd say my closest friendship with anyone going right now is with my wife. And you say, well, that's not really a friendship, but yeah, in a sense, it is. It's a person that you're close to. And I have seen and I've talked to a friend of mine who's an ENFJ, and he was, now that's an extroverted version of us, and he'd moved to a new town about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was catching up with him, and he said he didn't really have any friends in the new town. Which, think about that. If you're an extrovert with no new friends, I mean, that's got to be interesting. But it's pretty common as you age, and here's one of the reasons why. And it's the same reason, when it's the same reason it's harder to get into a good relationship when you're older as well. Um, in that it's not, nothing's new to you. Well, not, maybe something would be new to you, but most things are not going to be new to you. Most experiences that you're going to have are going to have this tang of familiarity to them. And a lot of times that comes with pain as well. And if you've been hurt, that's definitely the case. And a lot of times with, actual full-out relationships as opposed to friendships. Um, if you've been hurt, then it's going to be a bit harder for you to connect again. Maybe. Maybe not. I hope not. If you have been hurt, just let it go. Don't worry about it. Pain's fine. It's not a big deal. Pain brings meaning to life. Okay. Um, Anyway, as far as friendship go, they always come with a burden as well. That's a burden on your time. It's a burden on remembering to think about these people and consider them, send them texts or phone calls, or knock on their door and say hello, that sort of thing. And you may not always want to do that. And I think the thing is when we're older, we definitely won't bother with doing that unless we're getting a lot of value from that friendship. So if you're getting a lot of value, whatever it is you're looking for, maybe you're looking for a deep philosophical connection and engaging conversation. Well, if you've got a friend that you can get that with, that's definitely a friendship that's worth maintaining. Whereas if it's just somebody that it's all kind of surfacey and small talky, they may even consider themselves to be a good friend of yours, but the reality is more likely that you consider them to be an acquaintance. And that's all good too. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being acquainted with people and thinking well of people and helping people, being there for people. I do make a bit of a distinction with the actual appellation of friend, but that's me. Oh, I think I'll have an extra topic for our next video, because the next thing I want to talk about is getting into friends and people. And this is like people have like definitely drug-like. To us, they have like a sort of drug-like effect, and I think we, as INFJs, can have a drug-like effect on others. But I can't speak as much for other people, so I'll just talk about me. I know that when you're around certain people, I think it's our extroverted feeling. We definitely feel them, and we feel their atmosphere, their aura. It's almost like a psychic scent. How about that? And with some people, it feels wonderful, and we love it, and we love to be around them. And with other people, like people that are negatives, that's like a bad drug. It's like a bad toxic sort of drug, that you want to wake up from and run away from. And that's people that exhibit a lot of negativity. Um, I don't think most of us as INFJs tend to be that negative, although I can say 90% of my intuitive insights tend to be negative in the case of like, this won't work, that won't work, that sort of thing. Anyway, INFJ, that's it for today. Until I come back, keep on keeping on.